Welcome to Fourth and Frames. I'm Chris Battistel with my co-hosts Rhett Drew Scott, and tonight we have very special guests from the Daily Fix, Mr. Keith Flemming, as we dive into Bussin, discussing, and engage in some masturbation and discuss our panic button players and ring the alarm for Week 14. Let's get it popping. Red. Well, fellas, Week 14 is finally here, and if your league does it right, it is the last week before the fantasy football playoffs. We got none other than DFS guru, golf betting extraordinaire, Keith Flemming. Welcome to the show, Keith. How's it going, brother?
It's going great, man. Happy to be back on the show. It's been a minute. Seriously, big fan of the work you guys do. Happy to be back at Fantasy and Frames doing the Daily Fix show on Friday nights. Big props to Fantasy Six Pack for allowing me to do both. Yeah, man, we won a little money last week. Thank you, Scotty Scheffler, 14-1 little live bet. Hello.
Take that.
Ready to have some fun, talk about some guys we like, some guys we don't. And I'm ready to hear the alarm get rung. So
yeah, I love it. How's your fantasy season been so far on the year? Are you in a lot of like head-to-head leagues? Are you mainly DFS guy, best ball guy? How you looking?
I only do 3 leagues now. Honestly, that number is probably going to go down even more next year. I spend so much time on DFS that honestly I'd rather invest that money because they're all money leagues, in DFS, and it's just like this year was again just a reminder of why I'm so pro DFS. I had some brutal injuries early. Like Anthony Richardson was the guy that I was so high on, got him in so many drafts. He looked amazing, right? Gets hurt. I was the idiot that went back to the J.K. Dobbins train and so many drafts. I knew Lamar was going to have a monster year and got hurt. But I do have the ESPN Northwest Florida League, which it's just insane how this stuff happens. I am playing my lovely wife, who is the only person in the league who has clinched the playoffs. She is 9-4. Seems like everybody else is 7-5. I need a win against her this week, and she refuses to lay down for me, even though she has the number 1 seed secured. She's in, and it's going to be interesting because, of course, I got McBride and Murray both on a bye this week. We were talking about all these weather games. I got Cooper Kupp and Pook, all these guys. St. Brown playing in weather games, so I'm nervous. Not only am I going to miss the playoffs in that league, which they'll talk about on the radio, but to my wife, who might end up winning the league. So just, all the way around. Kind of sucks.
Hey, happy wife, happy life, Keith. Happy wife, happy life,
that's
man.
Fair. But she talks a lot of shit. So, you know what I mean? It may not be happy husband, happy life for the next couple of weeks. So
happy spouse, happy house, right?
That's
happy
right.
spouse, happy house.
Yeah.
Maybe you gotta light some candles, cook a nice dinner for her before the weekend. Try to get her in the mood to sit some of those studs.
Still her passcode, go in and edit the lineup while she's sleeping.
I was trying to do it nice, but you want to get grimy with it by all means. You want to go there.
We're a very competitive household. Let's put it that way. So.
I love it.
Drew says romance is dead.
Yeah.
Drew, Rhett, Week 14's here, guys. You guys are ready to roll? You ready for the playoffs? How many bye weeks have you guys got secured? What are we looking at?
All right, I've got a playoff spot clinched, pretty much a 1 seed. I've got one of these teams where I was just 3 weeks ago would have been over the moon. Like Eckler, Taylor, Etienne, Adam Thielen was looking good 3 weeks ago. And now all of that stock has just plummeted right now. So now I'm grasping on for dear life. I'll be in the playoffs, but now I got to rely on a little bit of luck in order to make something happen. So ask me how I'm doing right now. Ask in a couple weeks whenever I'm either thriving or weeping, one of those two.
Yeah, the only league I was in contention for a bye week, my team shit the bed against the team that it was between me and one other guy for a bye week. My team completely shit the bed this week, so I've lost that now, but I'm still comfortably in the playoffs. I'm going to make the playoffs in my home redraft league, so I just got to win 3 games. That's it. So no big deal there.
Yep.
And then in the Megala Bowl, the big tournament league that the fantasy footballers do, I'm in second place, and I'm playing the guy in first place in my division this week. And I'm behind 2 games, but the league has a league median game as well. So if I beat this guy and get above the league median, he falls below. I might be able to jump into first place.
Where's that been all my life? Drew, I had no idea about these median leagues. I love it. Like that would get me back into it because it really does. It makes it so much fairer than what happens inevitably every year, where somebody will have like the most points in the league and be 4-8.
Yep. Yeah, it's huge. But I'm in. So you have to be in the top 3 by week 15 to make it into like the big playoff. And I'm in second place in my division at worst. So I'm going to be in there right now based on points scored. Like 2,200 out of over 20,000 teams. So.
Oh, wow. Congrats, man. It's awesome.
Way to go, man.
We'll see how it shakes out when the playoff starts next week.
Just making the playoffs, so in that size of a league is really impressive.
Yes,
seriously.
It's been cool. It's been cool.
All right. Now, put your hand up if you're moving on to round 3 of Scott Fish Bowl.
Oh, okay.
Let's get to the question in the chat. Parker Bledsoe has got a star-studded running back room. So, Keith, since you're the guest, we'll give you the question. Start 2, Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs, Bijan Robinson, Javonte Williams, Derrick Henry, or Jerome Ford?
Well, Henry is an automatic start. I just think that, I'm assuming this is non-PPR because he didn't say PPR. So I'm absolutely starting Derrick Henry. We just know he's going to get the ball when you get in the red zone. And then I would probably lean it to Bijan slightly over Gibbs or Jacobs. Minnesota's defense has actually been pretty frisky the last few weeks. And with O'Connell, it's tough to trust Jacobs. But I think because of the volume, I'd have to go Bijan. I mean, even last week where he didn't really get anything going versus the Jets, he's averaging over 20 touches the last 3 weeks. We know he has the ability to, break any big play. But for me, it would be Henry and Bijan, but I'd also okay if you want to go with Gibbs. Now, if it's a PPR league, I would completely shift to probably Gibbs and Bijan or Bijan and Jacobs.
Yep. Rhett, Drew, any take? On board?
I agree for the most part. Like on the surface, Tampa looks like a really tough matchup for Bijan, but for whatever reason, the last 2 weeks, Tampa, I mean, you look at Indianapolis had great success on the run 2 weeks ago, and then this past week, Chuba Hubbard had great success on the ground against Tampa as well. So if Bijan keeps getting the work he's seen the last 3-4 weeks, I'm firing him up. I don't know what the deal is with Henry and his concussion, or maybe he doesn't have concussion. I don't know. If Henry doesn't play, then I'd probably go Bijan and Jacobs. So I'm pretty on board with what Keith is in line there.
Awesome. That's it. Let's get into some news from around the NFL. Just for anyone that is watching on Twitter, we cannot see your questions, so hop over to YouTube, drop them in the chat, and we will answer them live on air. Fellas, it was a big week for fantasy relevant injuries, and probably one of the most important, especially to this show, is Tank Dell going down with the fractured fibula. He will be out for the season. We did see Nico Collins shine, of course, in that game with his absence. Ramondre Stevenson, high ankle sprain, expected to miss 2 to 5 weeks. Drew, are we feeling good running with Ezekiel Elliott tomorrow against the Steelers?
Good is one term you can use.
Define good, Drew, right?
Yeah. Good is one way to describe it. I mean, the Steelers, they've been 20th against running backs over the last 8 weeks, so it's not a terrible matchup by any means. And I'm certainly not going to trust New England's passing game. So if I have to start a New England Patriot tomorrow, I'd probably go with Zeke. But I don't know if good is the right term to use to describe how I'd be feeling doing so.
Yeah, that's fair. Kenny Pickett injured his ankle, wasn't noticed in a boot.
Had
I believe
surgery. Did you see that?
Did he end up having the surgery? Yeah,
they said
the tightrope.
Expedite supposedly, the healing process, which to me is just really
that's that tightrope procedure, right?
I guess I had never heard of anything like it. Yeah, he did have the surgery, hoping to expedite again the healing process. Wow.
Yeah. That's so we're expecting, I think it's Trubisky to start tomorrow for the Steelers. Najee Harris, another, did not practice today. His situation is going to be up in the air for tomorrow.
Jaylen Warren, maybe.
Jaylen Warren, a smash start heading in. Derrick Henry, concussion or maybe not a concussion. Maybe he gave the earth a concussion.
Right?
What's going on? Mari Cooper did come up on the injury report. Limited practice. Brian Robinson, hamstring, expected to miss 2 to 3 to maybe 4 weeks. Charbonnet did have the knee injury. Christian Watson suffered the hamstring injury after catching the 2 touchdowns. His status is still up in the air. Trevor Lawrence, just an ankle sprain, got away with one there.
Rhett, he walked it off.
He walked it off. He had no cart, didn't want the cart, just one of those guys. Rhett, CJ Beathard, are we starting him with confidence, or are we letting our league mates make that mistake?
Yeah, you let your league mates make that mistake, because I'm gonna, to quote the legend Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who the hell is a CJ Beathard is what I'm gonna say, and we'll leave it at that.
Bad weather too, on top of that. Like, it's a new QB in a bad weather game. Yeah, no way.
I agree. Christian Kirk, pass catcher for the Jacksonville Jaguars, down with a core muscle injury. He's expected to miss quite a bit of time. I think they're expecting him back for playoff time. And Isaiah Pacheco did not practice today with a bruised shoulder. I don't know if he's going to miss much time or the game at all, but something to keep an eye on. Rugaroo, welcome. Yo, what's
Papa Shango?
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, Papa Shango. Also, we have some heavy weather games forecasted for the week. Rams at Ravens, potential rain, 20 plus miles per hour winds, temperature hitting around the low 40s. Let's go, Parker, Washington. Speaking of Parker, Washington, thank you, Rugaroo, for bringing that up. With the absence of Christian Kirk, we saw him get an increased workload. Since you are the DFS guy, Keith, is Parker Washington a guy you're trying to pinpoint this week, or is it because he's tied to the CJ Beathard and the bad weather, you're just going to stay away?
Yeah, it's the bad weather. I don't ever mind a player being tied to a bad quarterback if they're the right price, because really what I look for, I do mostly cash games, is volume, right? Volume's king. You want guys at a cheap price that are going to see targets and have an opportunity to score points. But I said today when I went on ESPN Northwest Florida that I'm going to try as much as I can to stay away from those 5 games with the quarterbacks and wide receivers, because unlike, obviously in fantasy leagues, it's totally different. You got to go with your horses. Like, you're not going to sit one of your best players for a guy that's, in a better weather situation. But for DFS, we're trying to build the best lineup, and we have all the, choices that we can. I'm going to be looking at those games in the Dome, the game in San Francisco, that Kansas City Buffalo game is going to be a shootout. So there's some other cheaper guys I like this week. One of them, just if people are listening, is Jonathan Mingo, who has seen a huge volume the last couple of weeks. He's actually had 36% of his receiving yards on the season, the last 2 games. And I think he's got a chance at 3,600 to have a really good game on DraftKings. And he's looking for 3-4 times their price and points.
Sweet. There you go. Speaking of the 5 games that you mentioned, Lions and Bears, Colts and Bengals, Jags and Browns, Texans and Jets, all expected to deal with some kind of either potential rain, high winds, or low temperature weather. So keep an eye on that. Like Keith said, if you're playing DFS, that's something that you're going to want to have in your toolbox for this upcoming weekend. That is news and notes from around the NFL. Let's get into Bussin, Discussing, and Mid.
Go and try your luck. Test me in again, we let it rain. Please don't start us up. Got that black and white, that yin and yang. Mr. Officer, please don't search us. We don't.
All right. Keith, Bussin, Discussing, and Mid. You're going to give us your Bussin players, so a player outside of the top 20 wide receivers, top 15 running backs, top 8 tight ends, and top 12 QBs based on Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. And you're going to give us a guy outside of those parameters that is going to smash this upcoming week. Discussing is a player inside those parameters that the consensus has ranked pretty high that we just think isn't going to hit their consensus projections. And then our mid player is someone that our favorite safe play, our favorite floor play, a guy that we think at the very least is going to produce to his floor. So let's start it off with Bussin. And Keith, you're the guest, so the floor is yours.
All right, full disclosure to start. I've got on the dude's jersey, so there's a little, homerism going on right now. But I promise you, if you listen to the Daily Fix or my show on Fantasy Six Pack, I always bring stats, so it's not just a straight up homer pick. But it is Drake London versus Tampa. This Falcons offense is completely different at home compared to the road. At home this year, they're scoring almost 23 points per game. On the road, not so good, 14.7. Atlanta's QB's at home, and it doesn't matter if it's Ritter or Heineke, 268 yards per game at home on 35 pass attempts, 6 of their 8 passing touchdowns. On the road, it is awful. 30 pass attempts. We're averaging 150 yards on the road on 30 pass attempts, 5 yards per attempt, and this is why I'm a cranky man. Usually comes Sunday afternoon. But, again, we are at home this week, and Drake London, no surprise with those numbers you see with the Falcons passing game and scoring, much different wide receiver at home compared to on the road. In home games since week 2, London averaging over 8 targets, 6.5 receptions, seeing 90 air yards per game, and scoring 17.25 points per game in PPR leagues. On the road, again, not good things. 3 receptions, 6 targets, 52 air yards, 7.86 points per game. London has been a top 30 wide receiver in PPR leagues in his last 4 home games. On the road, he has eclipsed that 1 time out of 6 tries. And then one of his 2 decent games on the road came against his opponent this week, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he put up 11.4 points in a PPR league in their first matchup. He saw 7 targets, caught 6 passes for 54 yards. It would not surprise me at all if London scores 15 to 20 points this week in PPR leagues. And he is due for a monster game. All of his good games have come at home. And I actually think the Falcons offense, as we talked about, don't let Tampa's defense fool you from the Carolina performance last week. They are not that good. I expect the Falcons offense to actually have a really good day indoors, which is great this week because we talked about all those weather games. Yep. So Drake London is my Bussin play for week 14.
Tampa's defense, not that guy, pal. I love it. I own a lot of Drake London, especially Scott Fishbowl, so I need a big week from him, man, because he's been.
I think he's going to reward you.
Utter disappointment.
Also, 25% target share, which is not bad.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Yeah, not bad at all. I like it. All right, there you have it. Drake London, Atlanta Falcons, Keith's Bussin player for week 14. Drew, when I seen this guy on the list, I can't believe the consensus had him outside of the top 15 in running back.
I couldn't either, man. I couldn't either. But so real quick, Chris Burns, Dynasty Deviant, he's running it back with last week. He's giving us Jaylen Warren again. So his Bussin pick whenever he's on the show last week. He's running it back. So, but yeah, Joe Mixon, it really surprised me. And to be honest, I don't really even like doing this because I'm not the biggest fan of Joe Mixon, the player, but I just couldn't understand him being ranked as low as he was this week, all things considered. So after a slow start to the year, he's been a running back 1 4 out of the last 6 weeks. And I understand that he's been under 4 yards per carry in 3 out of the last 6 weeks. But whenever you're averaging 18 opportunities a game and you're the team's goal line back, you don't really have to be that efficient to be good for fantasy. So, and I know Chase Brown truthers were in the middle of a small victory lap early in the Bengals game against the Jags last week. Whenever he was somewhat getting involved, I saw a lot of Chase Brown love from out of nowhere, but Mixon ended up out touching Brown 25-9 by the end of the game. So I don't think his volume is in danger as much as a lot of people would like for it to be. So you combine the opportunities with the fact that he's got a matchups with the Indianapolis Colts defense that's been the best matchup for fantasy running backs based on schedule adjusted fantasy points given up to the position the last 8 weeks. I think he's a smash play. And now, not only have the Colts been the best matchup for running backs over the last 8 weeks. They've given up almost 2 more points above expectation than the second best matchup for running back between the Washington and Commanders. So the gap between the Colts and the Commanders for the easiest and second easiest matchup is larger than the gap between the Commanders and the Panthers, who are the sixth best matchup for fantasy running backs. So you just start the running backs against the Colts, especially guys getting as much volume as Joe Mixon. So somehow, despite the volume and the matchup, back whenever I was doing my research yesterday, Fantasy Pros Week 14 ECR had Mixon as the running back 23 on the week. I've got him up at running back 12. So even if ECR's moved up a little bit, I'm willing to bet I'm still above consensus on that. But I fire up Joe Mixon this week.
Want to add just really quickly because I love him for DK this week. In PPR leagues, you should strongly consider Joe Mixon. 33% of his receiving yards on the season, the last 2 games with Browning playing. We're talking about a bad weather game in the cold, and he's already, again, saw season high targets last week, and 33% of his receiving yards on the season came the last 2 weeks. I would be not shocked at all if he catches 5 to 10 passes, has at least like 50 yards in the passing game. And then if he gets a rushing touchdown or whatever, you're golden. I love him this week at 6,100 on DK. He's one of my smash plays at running back.
Yeah. And I like the Cincinnati Bengals aren't going to put Jake Browning in a position where he's QB sneaking on the goal line either, because there's no one behind him. They're going to give the ball to Joe Mixon because they've put Joe Burrow in that position in the past for those QB sneaks. They're not going to do that with Browning now.
No.
Hopefully not with Burrow in the future either. After this,
exactly.
No tush push in Cincy.
Yeah, no, it just ain't worth it. So we got Drake London, we got Joe Mixon. Rhett, you're up.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna go ahead and let's talk about some Brandon Cooks against the Eagles this week, because Brandon Cooks, ECR wide receiver 25. Whenever I was doing my research yesterday, playing the last ranked pass defense according to schedule adjusted. So they have not been good against the pass. And Brandon Cooks has been a very different player since he put up 1 catch for 7 yards in that week 9 matchup against the Eagles. It was not a great look, especially when Dallas put up the offensive numbers that they did in that game. But we'll talk about more on that in a little bit. Brandon Cooks, since that game, has had 3 top 20 weeks. Dak Prescott has started to look for him a lot more. He's had touchdowns in 5 of the past 7 games. And he's not only that, he's been extremely efficient in everything he's done. He's had 24% or more of the team's receiving yards and only a maximum of 29% of the team's receiving targets over the past month as well. So he's doing a lot with less opportunity right now, and I'm a big fan. If you're not going to get volume, you need to be efficient, and Cooks has been big-time efficient lately. To the point where if we're looking over the past month, you had that giant 9 for 173 game against the Giants with a touchdown. But since then, he's also got a 4 for 72 with a touchdown and a 4 for 45 with a touchdown week against the Rams, touchdown week against the Chargers. So he's been finding the end zone a lot more consistently lately. This Dallas offense, like we said, they really are in a pocket where they are producing on a big level. And like we said, the Eagles being 32nd against the pass. Well, when we say that, they're 32nd against both wide receivers and quarterbacks. And that's evidenced in week 9 when Dak Prescott threw for 373 yards and 3 touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb had 11 catches for 191 yards, didn't get in the end zone, but overall the Eagles in that game gave up 28.4 fantasy points to Dak Prescott and 46.1 points to wide receivers. And somehow that week finished as the 7th defense because they had 5 sacks and 4 fumble recoveries. It was the most anomalous game you'll ever see for a team that produced that high, because they were shredded that entire game and somehow ended up with the facade of having a good week. So I'm just going to say this right now. In the coming weeks, if you're playing the Philadelphia Eagles defense, buckle up, boys. You should have a good time. Because that defense has trended down the past 3 weeks. Defensive 18, defensive 21, defensive 25 with their past 3 weeks in their finishes. So they're down. Dallas's offense is up. It should be another nice week for Brandon Cooks where he has a nice, efficient game. I'm not expecting a 1 catch for 7-yard performance this week. We should be in a nice Brandon Cooks spot for real.
Yep, I dig that. Rest of the season though, Rhett, what is the or who is the secondary pass catcher in that Dallas offense to roster? Is it Jake Ferguson or is it Brandon Cooks?
I've been riding for Cooks for about 6 weeks now, and I've seen the production. I know Jake Ferguson's having a very nice season, but tight end is such an unreliable position. And in a good tight end week, you're talking 4 for 50 and with a score, or with a really solid Brandon Cooks week, you're talking like we saw 9 for 173 with a touchdown. So in that case, if you're looking for that secondary pass catcher, always chase that upside because it's going to win you games, especially at this time of the year where it really matters with playoffs and trying to get a chip.
Yep. Yes, sir. Those are our Bussin players for week 14. Keith went with Drake London, Rhett, Brandon Cooks, and Drew, Joe Mixon. To anyone watching on Twitter, if you have a question for us, we cannot see them on that platform. So hop over to the YouTube, drop the question in the chat, and we will answer them live on air. We have Keith Flemming with us from the Daily Fix here to answer your questions. Those were our Bussin plays. Rugaru's Bussin play for this week.
A.K.A. Papa Shango. I can't get over it. I love it.
A.K.A. the Godfather. Our discussing players for week 14 are players that we don't like, that the consensus is pretty high on. So, Keith, you got the honors again, man.
So this is, again, a player that we're fading, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So I was going to go with TJ Hawkinson, which I still would, tell people to be leery. It's the return of Jefferson. Obviously with Dobbs, I mean, who you'd rather throw it to, Hawkinson or Jefferson? I think it's probably going to be Jefferson if he plays, so just be careful about that. But ultimately, I had to go with Calvin Ridley. And yeah, I mean, part of it's because of the weather. Part of it's because, T-Law's out. But the big thing is just the numbers when Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Calvin Ridley all play compared to when Ridley's missing either one of the other guys is just unbelievable. He's had 4 games this season that all 3 of those guys have played the entire game. In those games, he's accounted for 52% of his receptions, 60% of his receiving yards, and 80% of his touchdowns in 4 games. So for whatever reason, because I'm not this huge XNO guy anyway, I'm a data nerd, but I've tried to figure out what is it about, because at first, right, it was Zay Jones, but then we saw it again last week, right, that Kirk went out and you think, oh, Ridley's going to have a monster game. It did not happen. So for whatever reason, he's just not the same receiver when they're not all on the field. And sadly, with the news about Kirk, I don't like Ridley this week, and I wouldn't feel too great about him, in the weeks to come either.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. I'm sure it had a lot to do with the Lawrence. If Lawrence is out, that's another great reason why you're not going to want to play that wide receiver. And it is pretty intriguing, the splits that you brought up of Calvin Ridley with Zay Jones and Christian Kirk and without. There's something there to that either defenses just completely take him out of the game when those 2 other guys aren't on the field. I got to go back. I want to go back, and I'd really like to watch the tape on that to see if I can try to pinpoint what the scheme change is with those guys on the field and with those guys off the field, because the splits, like you said, it's drastic. Yeah, exactly. So Calvin Ridley against the Cleveland Browns is Keith's discussing play for the year. Drew, this one hurts because he is the darling of Fourth and Frames this year, and you're just gonna go put him out there like you don't even care.
He's evicted, his son.
I called Joe Mixon my Bussin play. I don't even like him as a player. Now I got to call Nico Collins discussing, and I love Nico Collins. Like I don't enjoy this. This isn't fun for me. But I know the Texans, we already talked about it. They sadly just lost Tank Dell, so Nico Collins managers are probably thinking, hey, Nico gets a bump now with no Tank Dell, which makes a ton of sense. But I still think he's a really risky play this week. I know CJ Stroud has been balling this year. That's another guy that I loved a ton, coming into rookie draft season, things like that. Chris, I know you were very much so on board with that as well. But his home road splits are alarming. He averages 73 less passing yards per game on the road, and his touchdown percentage on the road is 2.7 compared to a 6.5 touchdown percentage at home. Now, if Nico's quarterback is struggling on the road, you can probably guess that he has as well. And this year he's averaged 69 less yards per game, which is not nice. And all 6 of his receiving touchdowns have come in home games so far this year. He hasn't scored on the road yet. And you combine these home road splits with the fact that the New York Jets have been the most difficult matchup for fantasy receivers over the last 8 weeks based on schedule adjusted fantasy points. And I'm going to be lower than consensus on Nico this week. And to make matters even worse, of the small amount of fantasy points that the Jets have actually given up to fantasy receivers, only 44% of it goes to receivers that line up out wide, which is where Nico Collins lines up 79% of the time. And I feel like it's very noteworthy to say that over the last 8 weeks, I talked about they've been the toughest matchup over the last 8 weeks. In that time frame, they've played the Eagles, they've played the Chargers, they played the Bills, they played the Dolphins. Like they're not just beating up on bad teams and pumping up their stats. Like this isn't garbage time stats here. They're doing this against really good receivers. So, and we already talked about there's a chance that poor weather could affect this game as well. And you can beat the Jets on the ground. So I think that there's going to be a heavy dose of Singletary and Dameon Pierce this week. And then they're much more susceptible to the tight end than they are to outside receivers. So I think you could see some Dalton Schultz or Brevin Jordan if Dalton Schultz isn't back. And then, they're worse against the slot than they are outside. So maybe this is another Noah Brown spike week, assuming the weather allows it to be. I think that with the home road splits and with Nico lining up out wide and how tough the Jets are against outside receivers and the weather, all these factors, as much as I want to be excited about Nico this week, it's so hard to do so. I've got him down at wide receiver 27 on the week compared to the week Fantasy Pros week 14 ECR wide receiver 15.
Ooh, that's a big difference there, Drew.
I might still be too high. that might just be my love for Nico.
No, I agree with Drew. Nasty secondary, and again, the weather is a big deal. We're talking 20 to 30 mile an hour winds, potential rain. Like it's going to be an ugly game.
Yeah, it's not going to be good. When you put him on the list, I was like, I gotta go see what this guy sees. I gotta go see what he's looking at. And then when I looked at the success of the fantasy wide receivers against them, you're right, it's slot guys, and they faced Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, these big names that have played on the out wide and just haven't found a lot of success. So kudos to you to finding that one, because Nico Collins is a guy that most people are gonna want to start this week, right? But the matchup, the weather, everything that you just brought up there is solid points. Pivoting from Nico Collins, a player that a lot of people want to start, Rhett's got a juicy discussing play right here.
Yeah, guys, let's talk Josh Jacobs, because full disclosure, Josh Jacobs has been phenomenal over the past month. He's been a running back 3 finish or better each of the past 5 weeks. Steps into this week on Fantasy Pros is the ECR running back 7. But guys, I don't play over the past 5 weeks. I play on a week-to-week basis. And data is nice. Data is fine. Data gives us a lot of stuff to work with. But the bottom line is, with the data, we also get a Minnesota Vikings defense that has been 7th against running backs this season. Now, let's be honest. Josh Jacobs is the dude in that offense, undoubtedly. But Minnesota has only given up 20 or more fantasy points to running backs 3 times this season. Those 3 times were, first off, week 2, which was the DeAndre Swift game, if y'all remember that. Week 7, the San Francisco 49ers, clearly Christian McCaffrey. Week 11, Denver Broncos. I believe that was the big Javonte Williams game where he had something like 27 touches for 90-something yards and a couple tutties. So they have not had any point this season where they've had two bad games back-to-back in proximity at all this year. So that Minnesota Vikings defense has been stout against the run, and I know Josh Jacobs gets a ton of volume, but we're going to talk about why that volume isn't necessarily good volume. All volume is good volume per se, but he's averaging 3.5 yards per carry this season. He's coming off of his best game of the year last week where he had 20 for 110 and a touchdown. This all sounds great, but he hasn't put together 2 efficient games in a row at all this season. He's had 10 attempts inside the 5 zone this season. Only 3 of those have been for a touchdown. This is a spot where I believe the game script will be against Las Vegas. I think they'll be behind in this game. And speaking of game script, Las Vegas is 23rd in the season and game script in the league. And Josh Jacobs, here's a great stat for you that lets me know why we're not firing up Josh Jacobs this week. He has a 20.5% stuff rate on runs this season. He leads the league on, I believe, it's over 200 carries. He has 41 stuffed runs this season.
Ooh.
And I think that tells us everything that we need to know about how inefficient Josh Jacobs has been and the situation that he's in. So I know I'm getting ready to offend some people. Some people are still going to start Josh Jacobs despite my advice. But you know what? I'm gonna stand on this. Before a few weeks back, I said it with Javonte Williams, and it seems crazy. Let's hit Josh Jacobs this week and thank me later for it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of great talking points you brought up there with the inefficiencies of the Las Vegas Raiders offense. But I got to ask, you're in a position to start Josh Jacobs. You have Josh Jacobs or Isaiah Pacheco. Rhett, which one are you rolling with this week?
Assuming Pacheco's healthy, right?
Yeah, we're assuming Pacheco's healthy. He's healthy, ready to go.
And I don't have the matchup on hand. Who are they playing?
They're playing.
It doesn't matter. In the words of the Rock,
Yeah.
It's Pacheco. Come on, man.
Yeah, run Pacheco.
You're running Pacheco?
You were trying to trip me up there, but it's Pacheco. He's been on such a roll lately. We're gonna go Pacheco.
He has been. All right. I take that. A lot of good talking points there. Our discussing players for week 14. Keith dropped Calvin Ridley. Drew broke all of our fourth and frames hearts by dropping
mine included.
Columns. His included, but great points there. And Rhett with a juicy running back in Josh Jacobs. We're going to head into our mid plays, players that we think are some of the safest plays of the week, players that we think at the very least are going to hit their projected floor. Keith, finish this off here with your mid play of week 14, man.
All right. One of the advantages or disadvantages of watching your sorry ass football team week after week is you know what you're good against and what you're bad against. My Atlanta Falcons cannot cover tight ends. It's awful. It really is. We've despite only playing 4 tight ends that are top 12 in PPR points, I believe we were 25th on DK and around that number and points allowed in PPR leagues. And again, it's one of those deals at home because we're indoor. I will admit I was high on Conklin last week and he really let me down. But for instance, week 1, Hayden Hurst was the bargain tight end that I gave on our DFS show on Fantasy Six Pack. He was tight end number 1 that week in PPR. Some of the games that people have had at home versus my Atlanta Falcons: Hurst 5 for 41, a touchdown. Dalton Schultz 7 for 65, a touchdown. TJ Hawkinson 7 for 69. And then the last home game versus New Orleans, 2 tight ends that you wouldn't think is explosive or, great. Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill combined for 6 catches for 100 yards. Cade Otton only scored 9 points in the PPR leagues the first time, but we'll take that, right? Again, for like this week, he's 3,100 on DK and for what he's projected.
That's tight end 5.
That's right. But a reminder that he had one game this year where he went bananas and it was worse. Another really crappy defense versus tight ends in the Houston Texans in a dome where he scored 24 points and was tight end number 2. Otton's going to be a smash play in cash lineups for me in DraftKings this week. I would be shocked if he doesn't at least have 3-4 receptions. And what I like the most about him on DK, he had 0 targets and 0 receptions last week. So that means people are going to go, I'm not playing that dude.
Yeah.
Even with 0 targets and 0 receptions, he's had 33 targets the last 7 games. So really that was 33 in the previous 6 and 11 targets in the red zone his last 5 weeks. So
money.
I love Cade Otton. Again, 3,100 on DK. I'd be shocked if he doesn't have 3-4 reception, at least 30, 40 yards.
Yeah. Don't got to sell me on Cade Otton, that's for sure.
And yes, absolutely. Like Kyle Pitts, I've been saying it for almost a year now. He'll go to the Cowboys or the Bills or somebody and end up becoming the greatest tight end of all time. And I'll still be bitching about us taking Bijan Robinson over Jalen Carter. So it is what it is.
Very, very good points on Cade Otton. We got a mid-segment chock full of fantasy tight ends, and Drew's got another one that he thinks is a safe play heading into week 14. So, Drew, give it to us, man.
Yeah, I guess Keith and I are just taking turns crapping on our favorite teams and how bad they are at covering certain positions, because I also have a tight end playing against my favorite team who cannot cover tight ends. So welcome to the weekly edition of Start Your Tight Ends against the Los Angeles Rams. Rhett followed this process last week, and he had David and Joe.
Which one are you going with? Because I got one of them in my DK plays this week.
Hopefully it's the right one.
Well, I'm just curious because it might get me to change which one I pick.
So last week, Rhett told you to start David Njoku because he was playing the Rams, and for some reason, Joe Flacco decided he was going to target Harrison Bryant instead. But the process was still there, though. The Browns tight end ended up with 5 receptions and a touchdown. And he was the tight end 6 on the week against the Rams, who cannot cover tight ends. Now, this week, the Rams get the Baltimore Ravens and Isaiah Likely, who is my mid-pick for the week. Now, Likely, he wasn't great in his first game stepping into the Ravens tight end role against the Chargers right before their bye week in week 12. But I'm going right back to him this week. Prior to last week, Isaiah Likely already had 3 tight end 1 week games where Andrews had missed time, and now he gets to play the Rams, who have been the 3rd best matchup for fantasy tight ends on the year based on schedule adjusted fantasy points given up to the position. And with the projections of poor weather and high winds as well, I think there's plenty of short passes to Likely in a plus matchup that could be on the horizon. So if there is a pass catcher I want to target, given the weather and the fact that it's already a plus matchup on top of that, I think that you can trust Likely this week. Fantasy Pros Week 14 ECR has Likely as a tight end 9, but I've got him up at tight end 6 for the week.
When he sees 6 targets in PPR leagues, he's averaging 14 points per game for his career. So
there you go. And I think he comfortably sees that this week, especially with the weather.
Dynasty Deviate with the Charlie Kohler. Heard it here first. I wish, man. I wish Charlie Kohler would have at least one good game, but it's probably not going to happen. All right, Rhett. You got the last player for the Bussin, Discussin, and mid segment. This guy, the Swiss Army knife of all Swiss Army knife. Give us your mid player for week 14, man.
I feel so dirty doing this right now with how much I've crapped
No,
on him.
you don't.
And how much I hate how much our fan base praises him. But let's talk about Taysom Hill against the Carolina Panthers, because he's the ECR tight end 7, and it doesn't seem like it's an especially good matchup considering the Carolina Panthers ranked 6th in guarding tight ends over the years. But that being said, guys, I'm cheating. This is not really a tight end play. Because as a matter of fact, he's pretty much New Orleans' de facto running back 2. He's their goal line back. He's a secondary receiving option that has had about 40 targets this year. Like, he's done a little bit of everything, like you said. So if we're looking at it as more of a running back play in a cheat tight end spot, he had 13 carries, 59 yards, and a touchdown last week on the ground. And the Carolina Panthers are 31st against running backs. So they are vulnerable against the run, and that is where we know Taysom Hill is primarily used. So we are looking at a second running back who gets decent volume. He's at a 40+% snap share 7 times this season. Like, I'm sick about it. Like, I feel dirty. This is like almost a Raheem Mostert level thing that I did from earlier this year. But you know what? My job is to give you winning plays. And if you have a guy who's going to carry the ball quite a bit and you can plug him into a position that he's not really playing that much, you have to take advantage of that. And including the fact that the Carolina Panthers have given up 19 or more fantasy points to running backs in every game of the past month. And they've had 7 points or more to 3 of the last 4 tight ends they played. So they've even given up a decent volume by tight end standards lately. To get back to the running thing, Taysom Hill has averaged 5.8 yards per carry this season. He's had 22 red zone carries. He's averaged 3 red zone carries a game, and he has 4 rushing touchdowns. So if any of you have ever watched a New Orleans Saints broadcast, I need you to take a shot with me right now, because Taysom Hill is not a tight end, guys. He's a football player, okay? So we have to go ahead and just play it this week. And I see Drew
Collinsworth on exactly this guy right here is a football player.
Now here's a guy.
Yeah, he's the tight end's tight end.
Love it.
I read an interesting stat. Taysom Hill since week 7 is the tight end 2.5 point PPR points per game ahead of Travis Kelce and behind only this tight end. Can anyone guess the tight end?
Charlie Kohler.
Sam Laporta.
Great callback.
That's week 7. You say week
Since
7?
week 7, yeah.
McBride.
TJ Hawkinson.
Wow.
That was
TJ Hawkinson, Taysom Hill, and then everybody else. So
I will
I
say
hate it.
too
I hate it.
that
Yours is so
despite, and I like Taysom Hill this week. Kamara in PPR leagues and again in DraftKings is somebody I love because for the same reason Brett's saying Panthers suck against the run. But the thing is, Kamara averaging almost 12 points a game in PPR leagues this year, just in passing. He's averaging 11.97 points per game just in passing in PPR leagues at 8K. I think he's a real value this week on DK.
Yeah, I love it. Rougarou with the Taysom is going to get 20 touches. I love to see it.
He gets 20 touches. He'll score 30 points on that defense.
Oh, yeah, he will. Because he's probably going to throw a touchdown. He's going to catch one. And he's most likely going to rush one. So
he might even punt one. Who knows?
Drew is so mad right now.
Taysom Hill for the Rouge.
Get me out. Get me out.
Oh, man. But how many other teams really is Taysom Hill the starting quarterback on?
0.
Should be the starting quarterback in 0 teams.
Come on. He'd start on the Falcons for sure.
I'd take him. Let's put it that way.
That is Bussin, Discussin, and Mid. Our Bussin players, Joe Mixon, Brandon Cooks, Drake London. Our Discussin players, Nico Collins, Josh Jacobs, and Calvin Ridley. And our mid plays, Isaiah Likely, Taysom Hill, which caused Rhett to have a stomachache, and Cade Otton. Those are our Bussin, Discussin, and mid plays for week 14. Just a reminder, everyone watching on Twitter, we cannot see your comments, so head over to YouTube, drop a comment, say hello, drop a question in the chat for week 14 or beyond, and we will answer it live on air. We have Keith Flemming from the Daily Fix on with us today. You can find him at Keith Flemming on the X machine, the DFS dude himself. Fellas, that's it for Bussin, Discussin, and Mid. Let's get into some masturbation. Just like we did last week, we got a very special guest judge here, Mr. Keith Flemming. Keith, in this segment, one of us is going to propose a situation, and then the other two guys are going to argue that situation. And then you, along with the viewers and the presenter, are going to decide on the winner. We've had rookie running back against rookie running back. We have a fantasy flex off for the week. Last week, we even discussed IDPs. I'm not going to tell you who's king here. You might already know. I don't want to cook the books, as he likes to say. So let's get into it, Drew. What's your one off the top? You're the first judge, brother.
Yeah, so we're getting close to the fantasy playoffs. It's getting grimy. It's getting nasty. Quarterbacks are dropping left and right. So we're going to help out the viewers, and we're going to help them decide who is the better streaming quarterback for the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15 through 17. Chris, Rhett, I'm going to let you guys choose between Gardner Minshew and Matthew Stafford. Rhett, why don't you go ahead and start us off? You've got a home cooking for me, so it's a good thing for Chris's sake that I'm not the judge tonight. So why don't you let us know why Matthew Stafford's the better option?
Yeah, man, and it all comes down to the playoff schedule. Week 15, 16, and 17, they have the Washington Commanders, always tasty. The New Orleans Saints, kind of a tough one. But the New York Giants, but let's go through what these teams look like against each position over the next few weeks. Washington Commanders, let's expect Matthew Stafford to smash. 31st against quarterbacks, 24th against running backs, 31st against wide receivers, 11th against tight ends. The Saints, all right, that's going to be tough. 11, 4, and 29. And the Giants, 14, 25, 28, and 6. So, all in all, pretty good matchups coming up for Matt Stafford over the few weeks. These are defenses that can be had. And let's be honest, Matthew Stafford to Puka Nacua is going to be more than fine in the stretch run. And Matthew Stafford over the past 2 weeks, guys, he's turned the corner. Has been a quarterback one each of the past 2 weeks. He's getting healthy at the right time for the playoffs for your teams. His yards per attempt this season are 11th in the league. He's 9th in deep ball completion percentage. He is 11th overall in true passive rating in the league. He's arriving at the right time. You still might be able to get him in waivers in some places. And it's a bonus if Cooper Kupp decides to arrive at some point this season. Then he has Puka and Cooper Kupp and Kyron Williams in that passing game as well. Guys, Matt Stafford is your choice between these two quarterbacks for the upcoming playoff season. But go ahead, Chris. Try to spoil their minds and tell them otherwise.
I will. And thank you for giving me the floor, because it's funny that you bring up the strength of Matthew Stafford over Gardner Minshew, and you bring up the strength of schedule. The one thing that scared you away from pitting Matt Stafford versus Geno Smith was the strength of schedule. So I should be telling you why you should be playing Gardner Minshew over Matthew Stafford this week, Keith, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you why you should not be playing Matthew Stafford for the fantasy playoffs. And you brought up that juicy schedule. Yes, Washington is probably the only great matchup. And then you have the New Orleans Saints in Los Angeles. Decent matchup, I'll give you that, but they are the second best team in red zone fantasy points per game against the quarterback. They only allow 1.2 fantasy points per game in the red zone to opposing quarterbacks. Now, you mentioned the New York Giants in championship weekend. We're going to trust a near 40-year-old quarterback going all the way from the west to the east in the middle of December to play in New York on championship weekend. You better start making the arrangements with your league mates to split the pot, because you ain't going to win. Give me Gardner Minshew on championship weekend against Las Vegas, Mr. Las Vegas. There's nobody better for Las Vegas than Gardner Minshew championship weekend. And if you want to look at Gardner Minshew's fantasy playoff schedule, he's got the Pittsburgh Steelers, which over the last, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks have allowed opposing quarterbacks go. Let's see, I think I have it written down here versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're right in the middle, so it's a pretty good matchup for opposing quarterbacks. And then Las Vegas Raiders and the Atlanta Falcons, which decent matchups for opposing quarterbacks. Las Vegas Raiders over the last few weeks allowing opposing quarterbacks go for 18.1 fantasy points. And then if you look at the red zone scoring, 3.7 fantasy points per game in the red zone for opposing quarterbacks. So for me, when I'm looking at it, I don't want the 40-year-old guys. Guys, we're almost 40. I'm almost 40. I know what it's like to get out of after doing nothing on a Saturday. We're going to trust a near 40-year-old quarterback going from the West Coast to the East Coast in the middle of December to throw the ball in New York on the most important week of fantasy football, then crown him.
What I love is that he just says absolutely nothing good about Gardner Minshew that entire time.
I did. I said his schedule was good. I said Las Vegas, great matchup.
Hey, Keith, scratch that last part from the record, Keith. You've heard both arguments. Whenever you're going into your fantasy playoffs, are you riding with Matthew Stafford or Gardner Minshew?
I mean, this really pains me because huge Georgia Bulldog fan. Matthew Stafford is one of my favorite QBs ever. Dude gets hurt a lot. We got Puka and Kupp dealing with injuries. He's got Kyron Williams, who, if you haven't noticed, is the best player on the team. And most importantly, Gardner has got 3 indoor games coming up, which this time of the year, it makes a big difference. Not to mention, you said the Raiders, and I appreciate you not going into depth, but the Falcons suck. Like, our secondary is not.
Know your audience.
We can't get pressure. And honestly, it is. It's a better slate. Like, the Washington absolutely is a great deal for Stafford. But after that, New Orleans is a tough passing defense. And then the Giants defense has actually been pretty good. And I don't want Stafford in that cold weather. I'm not thrilled about either one. Don't get me wrong, but I would have to go with Gardner Minshew.
This is the stupidest shit segment of all time.
Red hates it here.
There you have it. Gardner Minshew over Matt Stafford for the fantasy playoffs. That was round number 1. Round number 2, the better wide receiver for the fantasy playoffs. Rhett, go ahead, man.
All right. So after I've talked about my disdain for this segment, we're just going to go ahead and keep it moving, guys. And we're just going to go ahead and say that heading into these fantasy playoffs, we have 2 elite wide receivers who have both fallen into season-ending injuries to their starting quarterbacks. So they are sitting in backup quarterback situations. The Minnesota Vikings with Josh Dobbs and the Cincinnati Bengals with Jake Browning. So I'm going to ask you two fine fellows, despite the rigging of this entire segment, every week to go ahead and choose between Chris, Justin Jefferson, and Drew, Jamar Chase. 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, who's first? You want me to go first? I can go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Drew. Chris, go first. Yeah.
Is this for this week? Sorry, I missed that. Or
so we're not even prepared.
Fantasy playoffs.
No, I'm ready. I got both my arguments ready to go. I just want to know which one I should pick. So fantasy playoffs, pretty straightforward. Chicago, Denver, New Orleans, and Minnesota Vikings need to win to stay in. And the only way they're going to be able to win is by slinging the ball, because we've seen that their running backs have been pretty much non-existent. Alexander Madison, as he's known on the show, Ty Chandler. I mean, I can keep going down the list of mid to non-existent running backs if you want me to. Jefferson's coming back, fresh legs. He's going to be Josh Dobbs' top target there in Minnesota. He's got New Orleans, which is going to be in a dome. He's at Denver, which is not the greatest matchup. And then he's back in Minnesota, where he's got Chicago again, divisional matchup. We've seen Chase have some success with Jake Browning. We know that the possibility is there for the Cincinnati Bengals and Jamar Chase to succeed. But Justin Jefferson with the better quarterback tied to Josh Dobbs. I mean, Josh Dobbs is playing for his job. Jake Browning is just playing to stay afloat. So I think the Cincinnati Bengals are going to try to keep it a little more safer with their game plan, trying to backdoor their way into a playoffs. And the Minnesota Vikings are just going to play backyard ball the whole way. And if we're talking players that I want on my NFL team, I might lean Jamar Chase, but we're talking fantasy football here. I'm going to lean Justin Jefferson the rest of the way.
All right. So, I mean, both these guys, they're elite receivers playing with backup quarterbacks. I don't think anyone would argue that statement. However, what Jefferson does have that Chase doesn't is he's having to come back from an injury himself. And not only is he having to come back from an injury, he's dealing with much more target competition than Chase is as well. While there's no doubting the talent level of Justin Jefferson, I'm here to argue for Chase, but I'm not going to come out and slander some crazy stuff and tell you that Jefferson sucks, because that's just not accurate. But chemistry matters whenever it comes to quarterbacks. And while Jefferson has been out, TJ Hawkinson has games of 6 targets, 7 targets, 12 targets, and 15 targets with Dobbs at quarterback. And Jefferson hasn't even had the chance to play with him yet. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that he has Jordan Addison, who presents more competition for targets as well. Now, Jamar Chase, on the other hand, he does have T. Higgins, whenever Higgins decides he actually wants to play. Yeah. And that's about it as far as target competition goes. I mean, his biggest competition for target is Joe Mixon right now. And Jake Browning, he's already shown us that he has no problem just feeding Chase the ball. Last week against the Jags, the man had 12 targets, and he turned that into 11 receptions for 149 yards and a touchdown. Now, we're talking which receiver do we want for the fantasy playoffs? And when you look at the strength of schedule for weeks 15 to 17, these guys are pretty similar. The Vikings have the 17th easiest strength of schedule, and the Bengals have the 19th easiest. So they're right there neck and neck. Now, the kicker is that the Bengals have cake matchups against the Vikings and the Steelers in weeks 15 to 16. And the matchup that is considered a bad matchup is against the Kansas City Chiefs in the fantasy championship, who, Chris, you have so eloquently pointed out to us that outside receivers against the Kansas City Chiefs see so much success. And you know where Jamar Chase lines up 74% of the time? That's right, man. He lines up outside. So as you have so eloquently pointed out for the last couple weeks, outside receivers against the Chiefs is actually a good matchup. So that means even though the numbers tell us that championship week against the Chiefs is a bad matchup, for Jamar Chase, it's a beautiful one. And so whenever you're deciding between two elite receivers with backup quarterbacks, take the one with a better schedule, less target competition, and the better chemistry with his backup quarterback. Give me Jamar Chase over Justin Jefferson.
I am going to have to say, first of all, that it should be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, that's the guy that I want, the best receiver of the three in fantasy right now. But in all seriousness, there's too much unknown with Justin Jefferson and Joshua Dobbs for me to pick him over Jamar Chase. And it's just the fact that we've seen Chase play 2 games with Browning. He's getting about 30% target share. He's already had one big game with him. And Jamar Chase has already made it known to Joe Burrow, throw me the damn ball, I'm open all the time. I have a feeling if Browning even thinks about not targeting him at a very high rate, he's going to just cuss him out on live TV in the moment. So I do lean Chase here. I will say, though, Jefferson terrifies me because, I mean, Dobbs has proven he can ball. And it would not shock me if Jefferson ends up having a monster 3-week run. But it does scare me that I don't know. And that is what I do in DFS. Is like we deal in what do we know? Like we try to know this much of a target rate. They're going to see this many receptions. I have no idea what it's going to be with Justin Jefferson, especially with the emergence of Jordan Addison. Obviously, he has a connection with TJ Hawkinson. So because of that, and I know that, you know, Chase is going to get peppered no matter what, and the Bengals are probably going to be down, which I'm not sure the Vikings will be. I'm going to have to go with Jamar Chase the rest of the way.
Boo. Hey, just so we're clear, Drew, you can't use my own information against me.
Watch me, brother. Watch me.
What's going on here? Also, Pittsburgh Steelers over the last 3 weeks have been the 3rd best defense against the wide receivers. So
who did they play?
It doesn't matter.
I always say that is, again, the Falcons, like when you didn't mention it, people are like, oh, their defense is good. I'm like, look at the QBs we played. Is our defense good?
Yeah.
We give up the 2nd longest time for a quarterback in a clean pocket. And it's like only because we're playing all these awful QBs. Is our defense good? Like that's a fact.
You know who had a good matchup, or you know who had a good game against the Steelers in the last 3 weeks?
Jamar Chase. This segment, we don't ask how, we ask how many. All right, that's it. All right, we got one more debate to go, and this is the battle of, I guess you could say, backup running backs for the most part, right?
Turn starters.
Turn starters. Which running back out of these two is the running back to take into the fantasy playoffs? Because, Keith, they are right around the corner. Drew is going to represent the emergent Chuba Hubbard, and Rhett is going to talk up the big man on campus, Alexander Madison. Drew, you're on deck.
All right, so my opening argument is that if you don't choose me as the winner, that means that you're siding with Alexander Madison, and we know nobody wants to do that. Okay, so but besides that, Chuba Hubbard took the starting job from Miles Sanders in Week 6, right before the Panthers bye, and he's had 3 RB1 weeks compared to the whopping 1 RB1 week that Madison has had in that time, where he was the RB8 in Week 9 against Atlanta. Now, despite not having any big competition for touches in Minnesota's backfield, you know, like Ty Chandler, they try to bring in Cam Akers. He got hurt. Like, they try to bring in guys. And he doesn't really have any big names in the backfield with him, but still he's only able to muster 50% of the running back fantasy points, 61% of the rushing attempts, and 59% of the rushing yards. And he hasn't scored a single rushing touchdown since Week 6, while Chuba Hubbard has accounted for 72% of the running back fantasy points, 66% of the rushing attempts, 70% of the rushing yards, and he scored every single rushing touchdown that backfield has accounted for since Week 6. Now, it's not often that you see an NFL team admit when they're wrong and go away from the money, but Carolina has done just that. that they gave Miles Sanders so $13 million guaranteed this offseason, and still they ended up riding with Chuba Hubbard since week 6. And that's just something you don't typically see NFL teams do is, hey, we were wrong. We didn't know what we were doing with our money. We're going to give this guy the touches anyway. But Chuba's left him no choice. Now, the only advantage that Madison has over Chuba that I'm sure Rhett's probably going to bring up, but I'll save you some time, Rhett. We'll just fast forward a little bit. He has an easier schedule during fantasy playoffs, but does that really matter when you're not good and you're not getting the volume? Like, does the schedule really matter at that point? I don't think it does. And if you can survive a tough matchup against the Falcons' run defense in week 15, Chuba has a plus matchup against the Packers in week 16. So whenever you consider this debate, ask yourself, number one, do I want the running back getting less work that's not as talented but has a slightly easier schedule? Or do I want the running back that's actually good, is getting the work, and is better than Madison but has a few difficult matchups? To me, the answer is clear, and the answer is never Alexander Madison. It's Chuba Hubbard.
Sure, bud. Sure. I love how you talk about Chuba Hubbard being this fantastic pie in the sky, greatest running back you've ever seen in your life. We're going to break that down real quick for you, and let's start here. Guys, let's just ask a quick question. Would you like an average running back on a bad team or an average running back on a good team? If you prefer number 2, then Alexander Madison will be your answer. And Drew, you mentioned the schedule so eloquently. You read it yourself, player. So let's just talk about that. These next 3 weeks, we have Las Vegas, Cincinnati, and Detroit for Minnesota. For Chuba Hubbard, New Orleans, Atlanta, and Green Bay. And guys, I want to talk about the breakdown for this season because he wants to talk about how untalented Alexander Madison is and how talented Chuba Hubbard is. Their stats for the season are practically dead even. Attempts, Madison 158, Hubbard 143. Rushing yards, 594, 557. Yards per carry, 3.8 per 3.9. Total touchdowns, 3 versus 4. Receptions, 27 to 28. Receiving yards, 174 versus 165. So, guys, we are looking, for lack of a better way of putting it, at the exact same player. And Fantasy Alarm has rest of season projections for you. Let's go even further. Projected attempts for the rest of the season, Madison 51, Hubbard 42. Rushing yards, 220, 188. Yards per carry, advantage Hubbard 4.5 versus 4.3. Fine. Touchdowns, 3-2. So we're looking at, for the rest of the season, according to Fantasy Alarm, friends of us, who we love so much, their projections have Alexander Madison being better than Chuba Hubbard for the rest of the season. So the argument for Alexander Madison is a better schedule plus upside. And in a dead even matchup with dead even players like we have right now, you have to go with the better matchups. Give me Alexander Madison.
I'm so sick right now.
Hey, Ray,
You're about to be even more sick. No. You're about to be even more sick because I'm going to go and make this ruling. You were talking about a Carol.
You can strike it from the record. You can strike it from the record. I don't care, but I need to say this man just used.
Somebody mute his mic. Thank you. Carolina Panthers. You're talking about the Carolina Panthers. Their points that they have scored the last 6 weeks. 15 with 1 touchdown, 13 with 1 touchdown, 13 with 0 offensive touchdowns, 10 with 1 touchdown, 10 with 1 touchdown, and 18. And yeah, Hubbard had a good game last week. But there is no way in hell I'm taking a running back on that offense over a running back on a team that now is getting Justin Jefferson with TJ Hawkins and all these other people.
So you want the running back with more competition?
With more competition, they were getting the red zone. Carolina doesn't never get in the red zone. Like, they literally don't score. I just told you they scored.
Alexander Madison hasn't scored in 6
41,
weeks.
51, 61, 79 points. 79 points in 6 games. And actually, they've scored 72 points because, again, their touchdown was not an offensive touchdown. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Madison because both of these backs suck. They both are terrible, but I would rather take the back on an offense that's actually good. The Panthers are the worst offense in the NFL by a mile, and that's saying the Jets and all these other teams. They're terrible.
I just got box score statted whenever my running back that I picked didn't start until week 6. He has almost the same amount of touches as Madison, and Madison's been starting since week 1. He had a 5-week head start. Oh my God, man, this is ridiculous.
That was a long way to say I pick Alexander Madison, but I dig it, man. I like that.
Oh.
Drew is.
I'm sorry, Drew. If this is the end of the relationship, it was a good run, bud. I'm sorry.
No, this
You know what?
I did a good job of pissing everybody off, though.
Yeah,
being a
Rhett
judge, so I
just-
guess. Well, I don't know. You're all right, Chris?
Yeah.
This is my favorite. This is my favorite segment on the show, man. It's so much fun. I love it. It's a blast.
Rhett just homered you, Homer Simpson boxing you right there. He just took you to. He just stood back. He let you do your thing.
I
You
need
had
you
him
guys
up
to
on the
come over and
ropes.
do this on the DFS show with me and Joe. It would be pretty funny.
Oh, it's a fun time. It's a fun time. That's it for Master Debation. We got Gardner Minshew over Matt Stafford for the fantasy playoffs, Jamar Chase over Justin Jefferson for the fantasy playoffs, and Alexander Madison over good old Canadian boy Chuba Hubbard.
For the reference, I'll be hitting the waiver wire on that last one for sure. But
right.
There you
Come
have
on,
it,
somebody.
fellas. Let's get in to Ring the Alarm. Before we hop into the segment, everyone watching, we appreciate you all. Anyone liking the stream, subscribing to the channel, or dropping a comment in the chat. It is really, really appreciated, and it goes a long way. 14 weeks we've been coming on here and having a ton of fun with everyone that has joined. But please head over to www.fantasyinframes.com to read the articles, go through the rankings, see the various shows there from Dynasty 365, Shoot the Gap, the Tuesday Waiver Wire Show, the Thursday Mailbag Show, the Daily Fix with Keith and Joe, and the Sunday Q&A, which we run for 3 hours. The team of Fantasy and Flames hops on there to answer all your start-sit, last-minute questions. But boys, this is Ring the Alarm. I'm going to present to you a player, and you're going to tell me whether we are ringing the alarm on said player or situation, or canceling the alert. And like we've done for the whole show, Keith, you're going to be at the top. I'm going to give you this running back. So far on the season, 783 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, 36 receptions, 208 yards, and a receiving touchdown, RB14 in total points, RB22 in fantasy points per game. But over the last 2 weeks, he's only averaged 5.95 half-point PPR points. As we head into the probably most important part of the fantasy football season, the fantasy football playoffs, are we ringing the alarm or canceling the alert on Philadelphia Eagles running back DeAndre Swift?
so again, as a dog fan, I don't know why y'all are doing this to me, but I was ringing the alarm on DeAndre Swift week 4 when I was picking him in DFS. It's a bad sign when a guy had 90% of his rush attempts the previous 2 years in the first 4 weeks of the season. He's not built for this. This is why he did not get a big workload when he was in Detroit. I don't know if he's technically wearing down, but whatever it is, he is not the same running back that he was early in the season. I mean, if you look, I didn't know it was this bad. I mean, he hasn't busted more than 80 yards since week 3. Goodness gracious. Like, it is not good. I'm very concerned. This Eagles team, who I have a ton of respect for Jalen Hurts and all the players they have, but I think the clock has kind of struck midnight on this team. We saw last week that the Niners just beat them up. And if the Cowboys were ever going to beat the Eagles, this is the week to do it. And if they lose again this week, they may be in trouble. So, yeah, I'm very concerned about DeAndre Swift. It's just, I don't know. I think they need to start looking elsewhere or try and figure something out. Remember, Jalen Hurts got a knee injury. They don't need to be putting this much work on him. I'm not going to go like, what's the idiot saying that Marcus Mariota should start a few games, but I am very concerned about DeAndre Swift and definitely ringing the alarm.
Yeah, maybe this is the situation that they've been saving Rashad Penny for. We
and
can
that'd be
finally
so
unlock that asset off our
Scott.
dynasty benches. That Boston Scott, the Giant Killer. They do got the Giants week 16, so keep an eye out for that. Kenneth Gainwell there as well. So, but probably the running back to start for the Philadelphia Eagles is Jalen Hurts on a week in and week out basis right there. So ringing the alarm on DeAndre Swift. Next up, Rhett. This player has been kind of teasing retirement. He's been finding a ton of success outside of the NFL, which might expedite that process. But let's talk Travis Kelce as a dynasty asset. We see game in and game out after every tackle he gets up and limps towards the line of scrimmage. But Travis Kelce as a dynasty asset, are we ringing the alarm or are we canceling the alert?
First, Chris, I got to tip your hat to you on the show sheet because this was so much fun for me to research. And I'm going to go ahead and say that if he doesn't retire, let's cancel the alert on Travis Kelce because there's precedent for an all-time elite tight end being productive past the age 35 season. Any idea who that might be? Let's take some guesses.
Tony Gonzalez.
Okay.
Did they date Taylor Swift, though?
No, none of them did.
That's
no one dated Taylor Swift.
Question.
Okay.
No,
Drew is spot on. It is Tony Gonzalez, and his highs were never quite as high as Travis Kelce's have been. But let's go ahead and let's make this comparison. Tony Gonzalez played 17 seasons in the NFL and missed 2 career games. Travis Kelce is in year 10, and prior to this season had missed only 2 career games. Over his career, Tony Gonzalez racked up 2,185.7 career fantasy points according to Pro Football Reference. That comes out to 128.6 points per season. Pretty good, especially by tight end standards. Travis Kelce, here we are in year 11. So far through year 11, he has accumulated 1,565.26, which means we're around that 140-ish range so far, which is obviously much better than Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez had a very underrated second act in Atlanta, where he wasn't quite as explosive as he used to be and all these different things. Yet, he was still good for 7 receiving touchdowns this season and about 800 yards. So even after age 35, Tony Gonzalez played until age 37 and started in the league when he was 21. So for 17 seasons, he was productive as any tight end in the league has ever been. So let's ask this question. The thing we always ask with Travis Kelce is, when is Father Time going to catch up? When is the injury going to hit him? Frankly, we can't predict that at all. But what we can do is take 2 players that have been healthy throughout their careers, know that they both had great trajectories, and we can compare those 2. So Travis Kelce, if he plays with his injury track record, I'm going to say cancel the alert because I feel like if he continues playing, he could be good for another 2 to 4 seasons in dynasty years. And if you have that with his track record and his injury, his ability to stay healthy, you have to hold a guy like that because even if he's not getting 1,200 anymore and it goes down to 808 touchdowns, you're still looking at a top 12 tight end. Hold the line, baby.
Yeah, that's great. Great spot right there.
It is. But Taylor Swift killed the Kansas City Chiefs and Travis Kelce. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. Jessica Simpson, Kim Kardashian, Taylor Swift, just killers of football organizations. Kelce is
I like this seeing red too. That's pretty good.
All right. Last one up here, Drew. Rookie running back, 7.2 fantasy points over the last 2 games. Hasn't been good for this running back. It is not Bijan Robinson. It is the guy who got hot. He got hot in the middle of the season.
He did.
That has turned into the other side of the pillow, and that is Detroit Lions running back Jahmyr Gibbs. Are we ringing the alarm or canceling the alert for the rookie running back?
Yeah, the usage last week was weird. There's no doubt about that. I mean, only 8 rushing attempts, and he actually ended up with negative receiving yards. But we're not going to ring the alarm just yet. He's just too good of a player in a great offense that's so fantasy friendly for the running back position. And on top of that, the Lions have the 6th easiest strength of schedule for running backs from weeks 14 to 17 as well. And that cake schedule starts this week against a Bears defense that has allowed the 3rd most receptions to the running backs this season. And in week 11 against the Bears, Gibbs finished 2nd on the team with 6 receptions for 59 yards. Shout out to Laquan Jones at Real Deal Fantasy on Twitter for dropping those numbers in my timeline today. So I think that Gibbs should have a good stat line this week. Now, his production is going to take a hit with David Montgomery healthy and taking away touches, which is why you should prefer Bijan Robinson over Jahmyr Gibbs rest of the season. Yeah, Chris Burns, I'm still salty about the results of Master Debation last week. I keep score. As you know, I keep score. Gibbs was running back 30 last week. Bijan was running back 20. I want to know on right now for the rest of the season for Bijan versus Gibbs. So I'm also now keeping score for Chuba Hubbard versus Alexander Madison, just so you know.
You can count it on your fingers, so it doesn't really matter. I mean,
I don't take losing in these things lightly. I'm a competitive guy, all right? So I'm keeping score. But he's look, Gibbs is a great talent and a great offense. He has a favorable schedule the rest of the way. There might be some ups and downs. The whole bite kneecaps thing that Detroit gets made fun of for. David Montgomery fits that better, but Gibbs is extremely talented, and he's going to find his way onto the field. He's already showed us how talented of a player he is. I just find it hard to believe that you're going to have enough good options to start over Gibbs moving forward, especially considering how favorable the schedule is in the fantasy playoffs. Whenever you look at those matchups in your fantasy lineups,
all indoors, which is the biggest thing because we know golf is a totally different.
He's an indoors,
and so is the offense.
Yeah, exactly.
All indoor games.
I don't know how you can stare that guy down in your lineups and not start him. So it sucks. There's going to be ups and downs, but cancel the alert. You just got to put Gibbs in your lineups, ride with the highs and lows. And you got to hope that the highs come whenever you need them, which hopefully week 17 is one of those, and he'll win you a championship, but just, not as much as Bijan Robinson's going to win you a championship.
Running backs are like tight ends now, though, just at a little higher point total, that there's very few guys that every week is going to go off. I mean, there's maybe a handful. And other than that, you're just going to have, what do you have? He just had what was it 3 weeks ago? 3 straight games of 20 plus points. So,
yeah,
to Drew's point, unfortunately you got to, eat some crap, and then hopefully at the right time they go off for you. But it's too good of an offense, too talented player. And to me, the big thing is when the Lions are indoors, totally different team.
They are.
So there you heard it. With Jahmyr Gibbs, you got to hope that during the playoffs, your crap turns into chocolate. That is ring the alarm. We are ringing the alarm on DeAndre Swift, canceling the alert on Travis Kelce as a dynasty asset. And we are canceling the alert on Jahmyr Gibbs, given his last 2 weeks of production. Fellas, another great show in the books. Again, today we were joined by Keith Flemming from the Daily Fix DFS show, he is on with Joe Matz. Keith, one thing we do on this show, because we do really appreciate you coming on and chopping it up with us. I missed your last outing. I did miss tagging you on Twitter as well, mentioning you as one of the guests that did sing, because you did do that, and I really do appreciate that. But one thing we do for our guests here is we give them the frame. The frame is yours. Let the people watching, listening, what you got going on inside of fantasy football, outside of fantasy football, anything that you're passionate about, anything you want them to know about. Mike is hot, man.
I just want to say that I think, seriously, this is one of the best shows in fantasy football. I enjoy watching it each and every week. I think you guys are extremely talented dudes, and I appreciate y'all having me on. And you can find all of my stuff on my Twitter at Keith Flemming. You'll probably see some stuff about my dogs. I got a cat. Obviously love DFS and big time golfer too. But seriously, enjoyed coming on. Really do enjoy the show. I watch it almost every week, and appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you, man.
With words like that, you can come on anytime, man.
just for the record, let the record show our first multiple time guest on the show too.
Yeah.
Oh,
There you
wow.
go.
I do
Yeah.
feel special. All right.
There you go.
It's like SNL, right? Like now when I come in, I'm going to have like the number of times I've been a guest. It's great.
Yeah, there you go.
Put it in the record books. Put it in the record books. That's another great episode of Fourth and Frames. Drew, Rhett, anything else to add before we get out of here?
No. Bijan Robinson over Jahmyr Gibbs, Chuba Hubbard over Alexander Madison. Other than that, I'm good, baby.
All the flavors in the world, and you choose to be salty.
But most importantly, over the past 2 weeks, on things that he was very passionate about, Rhett Manuel over Drew Scott. So anyway,
he's got me 2 weeks in a row. I'm starting to get pissed.
He's got you. That's it for us. For Keith Flemming, for Rhett Manuel, for Drew Scott, I am Chris Battistel. Toodles.
Thank you.